apologize. I broke one of my cardinal rules about being tardy. I apologize for that. I appreciate everyone's flexibility in meeting so late in the day. As we've talked about before, this is a very time-sensitive piece of legislation, so I just appreciate you guys working with me. As we speak, our revisor is working on some amendments, so I do want to take the opportunity in the meantime to welcome Senator Wilborn to Commerce and Senator Pittman. So welcome to the committee. You guys are being thrown in the deep end today, so to speak. So we will need to wait for our revisor to arrive with those amendments. So we will stand at ease for a moment. Also, committee, another quick announcement. Remember, on Thursday, we are having a joint meeting with the House Commerce Committee. We will be meeting at noon instead of 10:30 in 112 North. So make sure you got on and lunch will be provided. So. Okay, committee, we will come back to order. We will give our reviser a moment to get settled. And I do want to thank profusely our staff who has been so flexible in the agenda changes to the research, to our reviser. They've been gracious. They've worked extremely hard. So we need to be patient as they are fulfilling their role and providing us what we need. So thank you very much to the staff. And Charles, when you're ready, we will, committee, we are going to, first of all, are there any bill introductions? Seeing none, we're going to work Senate Bill 347. Charles, when you're ready, we will have an overview and then open it up. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. I apologize for the delay. I refer you to the outline that I provided at the hearing with respect to Senate Bill 347. If you recall, Senate Bill 347 is a new, large economic development project that's proposed by the Department of Commerce. There are several components to it. First of all, there is the requirement that there be an investment of $1 billion for a qualified firm, and that's aimed at a manufacturing facility or possibly a headquarters facility that comes into Kansas and makes that kind of investment. In addition, there are benefits provided for suppliers to that manufacturing firm or headquarters through the bill, and those benefits, once an agreement is made with the Secretary, include an investment tax credit of up to 15% based on the investment made each year, a property tax exemption of 50%. That's limited to a facility that's in a foreign trade zone and engaged in a foreign trade zone program. There's also with respect to qualified suppliers, there's a payroll tax incentive similar to PEAK. With respect to qualified firms, there is a up to 10% reimbursement for total payroll. There's also, see if I'm missing any benefits here. There's also reimbursement of employee training and education expenses for both qualified suppliers and qualified firms. And then there's also a sales tax exemption for construction costs of a new facility. So that's the bill in a nutshell. There are provisions with respect to clawbacks and requiring that the firm actually make the investment. There's also a bond requirement for completion of the shell of the facility that the firm has to pay if it doesn't do that. I think that's a summary. I stand for questions.
Questions from the committee? Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Was there a fiscal note included with the sales tax exemption, property tax exemptions, all of the other exemptions that were included in this legislation?
I did not have a chance to check online before I came up. There's not one to my knowledge.
Additional questions? Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I find it difficult to work legislation without having a fiscal note. It's rare that we attempt to do that. I would ask that the committee get a fiscal note before we move on this legislation.
I appreciate that. It will be hard to have a fiscal note. This is just providing the ability to bring these projects to Kansas. So I would say probably depending on the size of the company that would be coming in, potentially there would be different fiscal notes depending on the specific project that we are competing for. So Senator Dahl.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Didn't we just pass a bill dealing with the wildfires and fencing, and we had no fiscal note? We asked for one and they didn't have it just last week, I believe.
I believe that to be the case. Senator Tyson.
Madam Chair, there was a fiscal note on that and an estimate.
Other questions for the reviser? Senator Pittman, then Senator Steffen.
Thank you. This is for the reviser. On page 6 of the bill, it's, I don't know, line 27. There was a question asked, and it's actually further down, section 5 of that, my gosh, I guess page 6. It's on line 36 and 31. Basically, there was a question if, you know, the agreement seems to be if it's approved by the Secretary of Commerce. We had a question in the caucus about would that, if that secretary leaves, presumably it's not just an agreement with the Secretary of Commerce that's in, at that time, it's the Secretary of Commerce for, the agreement seems to be specifying the secretary, but it's really with the state of Kansas, right?
Right. The reference to the Secretary of Commerce would be a reference to the Office of the Secretary of Commerce, so it would be any secretary.
So that would be binding no matter what the administration was?
Correct.
Whoever was in that office. Thank you. Just wanted to clarify that.
Senator Steffen.
Thank you. I would like to reiterate Senator Tyson's concern. This project remains blinded, but there are parameters for it. The bill has some parameters as well. I think it'd be fairly simple to develop a fiscal note with different spending levels. And I think for a project of this size, number one, it would be easy. And number two, I think it'd be incredibly critical. I don't think posterity would look very kindly on us binding up billions of dollars and never having done some basic investigatory look at the expense on this. Thank you.
Other questions? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Along that line, I don't know if our research department has had an opportunity to, or the revisers, but most likely to be research, to look at the testimony of Mr. Traubert from the Kansas Policy Institute to see if they would agree with his fiscal note, or in part or in whole, because Mr. Traubert communicated some rather large numbers, and I thought that it appears we're going to have no fiscal note, but I thought if research felt like that was reasonably close or a portion of it was right, because we can see in the bill that there are a couple places, we know it's $25 million. And so anyway, I guess my question, Madam Chair, would be of our research department if they wish to answer.
Dylan.
Madam Chair, we have not evaluated that testimony for its validity in that sense. I mean, that is something if you wanted to ask us to do it and review it, we could, but it's not something we're prepared to testify about right now at this time.
I'm assuming from the committee and the comments being made that that would be something the committee would like to see. I would like to remind the committee to keep in mind that this is not about the specific project that Mr. Traubert was testifying on. This is the bill that outlines the ability to bring other such projects. So I just want to make sure we're clear on that distinction. Any other questions for the reviser? Senator Ware, then Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it's not so much a question as a comment. I was, in my hearing of Mr. Traubert's testimony, his numbers were as much as rather than this is what it is. So he was kind of talking in maximums as I heard it.
Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is for the reviser. I asked this question of a conferee and did not follow up, and I don't know if you have any answers at all for us, but in Section 6, new Section 6, it talks about establishing in the state treasury the Attracting Powerful Economic Expansion Payroll Initiative Fund, or Incentive Fund, I'm sorry. My question, is there knowledge or understanding of where the funds would come from that would go into this newly established fund in the state treasury? And along with that, Madam Chairman, I'm going to just ask the next question, because Section 8 basically is the same type of a question. Again, establishing in the state treasury the Attracting Powerful Economic Expansion New Employee Training and Expansion Fund. So there, in this bill, are two new funds established in the state treasury. Generally, a fund's got to have a revenue source, and I thought I'd find out if you had an answer as to what the revenue source or where the revenue source would be from.
So these funds would be subject to appropriation acts. If you look at Section 6, line 43 on the bottom of page 14, and I believe there's a similar line in the other fund. If I take a moment to find it, but they would be subject to appropriation acts, so it would be up to the legislature to fund, to put money into these funds, and that money would presumably come from the state general fund.
Senator Peck.
Madam Chairman, so I guess that would be the answer. It would be in the legislature's lap, and since there is no dedicated funding source, I would tend to agree with the reviser that it's going to be money taken out of the state general fund that could have been appropriated for other purposes, but we're going to put it in these new established funds. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Stephan, did you have a question?
Thank you. I don't see anything in that verbiage that really defines the process by which those funds receive monies or say that they shall receive monies. It's really fairly nebulous, that whole process, whether it even has to occur, correct?
Well, Senator, if you look at the language on page 14, subsection F, lines 28 to 34, which references the total payroll cost benefit, which is a percentage of the total payroll cost for qualified firms. I think it's up to 10 successive years and up to 10%. So if you look at that subsection F, you'll note that it states subject to appropriations, therefore, the allowable amount of such claim as determined by the Secretary shall be paid. And then if you look at the section that immediately follows establishing the fund, you know, we have provisions in there that all expenditures from the fund shall be made in accordance with appropriation acts upon warrants, et cetera, which is kind of standard boilerplate language. So together, basically, that's kind of a standard provision, you know, indicating that this is a fund that the legislature will need to allocate money to in appropriation acts.
Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. If I may, Charles, so would you clarify? That sounds like the Secretary of Commerce would be driving appropriations, not the legislature. That if he signs the contract or she signs a contract and commits us, then the legislature would be obligated to fund the program?
Well, in a way that, so first of all, let me answer your question, Senator, in two parts. So, no, the language pertaining to the Secretary is just the Secretary gets to, you know, basically sign the check, right? I mean, it's just an administrative kind of verbiage. With respect to your question about, does the secretary bind the legislature? So not directly, but in a sense that if the legislature, passes a bill and gives discretion to the secretary to enter into a contract, and in the course of that contract, the secretary says, we're going to give you, X amount of dollars for your payroll, 10% payroll tax reimbursement, then, we have a contract. And so the question then would arise, well, would a future legislative act be able to abrogate the terms of that contract? And, it's a standard provision in our in state contracts that any contract is basically can be terminated if there are not sufficient appropriations made for that contract. So, it's something that it's a consideration. It's just, well, I don't know what more to say about it, but I hope that answered your question.
Senator Tyson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, it was a little bit ambiguous. I want to make sure that the Secretary of Commerce can obligate the legislature for X amount of dollars if this legislation would pass. And there is nobody else looking at the project besides the Secretary of Commerce, not even the Secretary of Revenue. Would that be correct?
Yeah, I believe, Senator, yes, I believe the way the bill is phrased, the primary discretion is with the Secretary of Commerce, who enters into that agreement. And then this is true of any economic development act. There's, if any department, enters into an agreement with a firm for some benefits pursuant to, a program that the legislature, an economic development program that the legislature has passed, there would arise an issue of, can a future legislative act abrogate that? And if you think, this is similar to, circumstance that arises, if bonds are taken out for a project, right? You can't, the legislature can't go back and say, well, it could. There'd be an issue about it. And say, we're not going to pay those bonds anymore. There's an issue about it. And could the legislature? Well, maybe. Would there be a lawsuit? Maybe. So it's just an issue.
Senator Pittman?
Thank you, Supervisor Charles. I'm sorry, I don't have his last name. Okay, sorry. So when we do this, we have other programs like the PEAK program and HPIP and some of the other, we also have a similar kind of reimbursement model, if you will, right? And so money is not put out, appropriated right out of the gate. We don't just give it to somebody right out of the gate. We have the incentive sitting there, and they meet certain performance benchmarks, like in those programs that are already established, and then we do a similar action for those. Is that not correct?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. And so the money's coming in, and then we reimburse, or however that works. I'm not sure the exact mechanism. Thank you, Revisor.
Senator Tyson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. But I would also point out with those programs, there are caps, especially with HPIP. In fact, that program began out with a $6 million cap. And we realized that we had a Secretary of Commerce that was interpreting the law incorrectly. They were giving out $6 million a year. Do the math. That adds up fairly quickly. On this, we're looking at $1 billion, and I'm not sure the program's capped on tax credits or property tax. Would that be correct? Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Senator, yes, that would be correct. There is a cap in a sense with the property tax exemption, just in the percentage. There is a cap with respect to, I think it's the employment and training provision. And I'm not sure if there's another one, but I don't, but in general, with respect to the other benefits, there's not a cap on them.
Senator Pittman?
Supervisor Charles, when you said that's correct, what you were saying is, what's correct is that there's no cap on some of those pieces, not that we're necessarily extending $1 billion out. You didn't have a fiscal note on
Right,
it.
no, I'm sorry, I should have been more clear in my response.
Okay, seeing no other questions at this time, I do know that we have some amendments. So if you want to start, Charles, with the technical
Okay.
amendments, we will start there and work forward.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. So these are just some technical corrections that I would appreciate the consideration of the committee for. And I'd also, if I don't forget, Madam Chair, I would like for some discretion with respect to whatever amendments are offered, that we can kind of tweak the language a little bit if the committee would be willing to do that. So on this amendment, first of all, page 2, we just have a correction to a paragraph number. Page 8, we just have a correction to an internal reference to a section. Page 11, that's just clarifying language. With respect to the investment tax credit, it just is an attempt to clarify the language a little bit. 17, page 17, we have a deletion, which is just extraneous language. It's inconsistent with the rest of the section, and I think it was probably pursuant to a prior draft and just wasn't removed. Page 55, we have a deletion to the date. And the reason for that is that originally the intent of the bill was for the sales tax exemption to be effective immediately. That was sort of changed along the way, and then that date did not get removed. If you look at section 10, you'll see that the provision that refers to the sales tax exemption just says on the effective date of the act. The effective date, if you look at the bottom of page 55, is the Kansas Register, and that is basically for the purpose of making that sales tax exemption effective upon publication in the Register. So the effect of that removal of that date is basically to make the bill consistent with internally with its original intent. I note that if the committee wishes to change the effective date, obviously that can be done. You just need to change it to, instead of register at the bottom of page 15, you can make it effective upon publication, and that would make it July 1st, 2022, with respect to everything in the bill, including the sales tax exemption. Finally, there are just some changes in language to qualified building facility. It should have been business, not building. Thank you, Madam Chair. Stand for questions.
Questions on the technical amendments? Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. On page 17, that seems more than technical.
May I respond?
Yes, Charles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So if you look at Section 10 there, one of the sort of provisions of this bill is that, there is a $1 billion requirement. If you look at the top, it took me a little while to find this. If you look at the top of page 17 at lines 7 and 8, there we have the requirement that with respect to a qualified firm, the requirement of investment of at least $1 billion. So that requirement is laid out in Yeah, I apologize. This will have to be changed a little bit. The $1 billion requirement should only go to a qualified firm. And so the language here is ambiguous, and that's what I was trying to get at, just to remove the $1 billion requirement with reference to a qualified supplier. And the way it reads, it could, it would be both, and that's not, so it's inconsistent with the intent of the act. I will note that qualified firms have to be, with respect to every benefit, they have to be meet the requirements of Section 2. If you look at that line 12 on Section 10, line 12 on page 17, it references the requirements of Section 2, and it's clear in Section 2 that a qualified firm has to make a $1 billion investment. So the intent of what I was trying to do there was just remove the reference of the $1 billion requirement with respect to qualified suppliers.
Senator Pittman?
So it seems, Supervisor Charles, that you could have just said have at least $1 billion and been done with that. And then just have because all it's doing is referring back to the definition you had before, right? And you basically made it ambiguous because you put a 1 billion on the number 2, and then it's supposed to be whatever it was, 10 million for number 3. Is that right?
Basically, yeah, the 10 million is sort of the sales requirement for qualified suppliers, but basically it's just 1 billion for the qualified firms. That's the investment requirement. For qualified suppliers, there is no investment requirement. There's just the requirement that the qualified supplier is selected by the qualified firm, and the qualified supplier makes $10 million in annual sales to the qualified firm.
In my reading, maybe I just want to clarify. So the reason we're striking that is because if you look at up above that, it says the qualified firm or qualified supplier. Well, there are different standards for a qualified firm versus a qualified supplier. So you're not wanting to confuse that a qualified supplier would have to meet the same $1 billion threshold as a qualified firm. Is that?
Correct. And
Okay.
thank you for stating that
Okay,
much more
I got
clearly
it.
than I did.
Senator Tyson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That is a substantive change. That's not just a technical change, if I may. On line 23 of page 1, it defines commerce, commence investment. Because what would a $1 billion investment look like? And according to this bill, it would be up to the discretion of the secretary. Is that correct, Madam Chairman?
Senator Tyson, we're going to deal with the technical amendments. Does that relate to a technical amendment?
Madam Chair.
Charles,
I just,
Care to
I don't know.
answer?
Yeah, I don't know how to try and make it more clear, but in my view, respectfully, it's not a substantive change. It just makes that sentence, it's an error, correcting an error, because it's, if you look at the whole bill, it's, there is no investment requirement for qualified suppliers. There's a $1 billion requirement for qualified firms. And there also is a reference in Section 10 to Section 2 where that is all laid out. So that was my intent in making this correction.
Okay, any other questions regarding the technical amendments? If not, may I have a motion? I have a motion from Senator Pittman to approve the technical amendments, seconded by Senator Ware. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. Motion passes. Other amendments? Charles, I believe I have an amendment. A couple, but we'll start with the, we honestly haven't had a chance to even number these, but I believe you know which amendment I'm referring to, hopefully. My apologies, Charles. My apologies, committee. This is the incorrect one at the moment. Please set aside for now. Okay, if you would please explain.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So this amendment modifies, or actually it adds a new section. It basically ties the receipt of any benefits under the Act as certified by the Secretary of Commerce to the Secretary of Revenue to a reduction in the corporate corporate income tax rate of 0.5%. And that rate reduction is applied first to the normal tax on corporations and then secondly to the surtax. There's also a reporting requirement. You can see on subsection D there. And also publication requirement of the new rate by the Secretary of Revenue in the Kansas Register. So again, what this amendment does is that in any fiscal year that the Secretary of Commerce certifies to the Secretary of Revenue that either a qualified firm or a qualified supplier has received benefits under this act for the next tax year, the corporate income tax rate will be reduced by 0.5%.
It's an excellent explanation. Any questions? Senator Pittman?
Just to kind of be very clear, how does the rate go down in the next fiscal year if we sign on to a new qualified firm or supplier? Does the benefit have to somehow be realized, or is it the signing up of?
No, well, it says the language is a qualified firm or qualified supplier receives benefits.
So is that a contract that promises the benefit over the life of the 5 years of the $1 billion investment? Or is it really after the firm starts moving forward and then they get the refunds on whatever particular things they are?
I would interpret receives benefits as the actual receipt of benefits. So that would be if they start construction and there's a sales tax exemption, that would be a benefit.
Just to kind of be very clear on this one, so then they start getting benefit and it slowly, is there some kind of number that we get to get to 0.5%? Or is it just when they receive benefit, that's when we have a 0.5% reduction on the corporate tax in the following year?
Yes.
The second one?
Yes.
So no matter what the benefit is, if I get a sales tax dollar of $1 of benefit, we're going to reduce the corporate sales tax by 0.5%?
Correct. Yep.
That's the way, okay.
And I will explain the reason for this amendment. Is we've heard time and time again that incentive programs that we have in place, that we're picking winners and losers, and we're not leveling the playing field for all businesses. So if we're going to bring in, and I know we've all heard this line too, there is no appetite to cut taxes in Topeka. This way, as we're bringing in the economic development and reaping the benefit of that, we are working toward leveling the playing field for all businesses. It's a step in the right direction. So that is the reason for this amendment. That's the reason we're having this on this bill. So other questions? Senator Pittman.
Madam Chair, I really like the underlying bill incentives. This does expand out into corporate tax code quite extensively across all corporate businesses. It does expand the scope of what we're talking about here quite significantly. I really like the idea of tying benefits that we get out of this program to a potential benefit for everyone, but it doesn't necessarily tie it one-to-one. It seems like if we just have $1 sent out there, we kind of put it out to everybody. It sounds like it could be confusing. I have hesitation on this one, Madam Chair. I'm just letting you know that.
I appreciate that, Senator, and we did look at all kinds of step up, step down tied to return, and it was so complicated. This simplifies it. It gives benefit back to those businesses that have been in the state, have been paying their taxes based on the projections of what this apex could bring. I think it's a fair assessment to give substantial benefit to all businesses. So that's the intent of this amendment. Senator Pittman.
Just to ask the question, what's the kind of impact we have on, in terms of our corporate taxes that's been maybe estimated on this? I'm sorry.
Can you repeat that?
Fiscal note. What's the kind of fiscal impact we see year by year basis at 0.5% of our corporate taxes? What's that look like?
That's a great question. I will tell you that what I've been told is a 0.5% reduction corresponds to about $50 million a year. Any other questions? Do I have a motion on this amendment? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think I know the answer, but I'm going to say this relates only to corporate income tax and not individual income tax.
That is correct.
So over time, we may get blowback from individual income taxpayers, sole proprietors, C corps, et cetera, because their rate will be significantly higher than the corporate rate, which I like this part, but I want some more.
Senator Peck, I understand. I appreciate that sentiment. It is a starting point. Other questions, comments?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Advisor.
I just wanted to point out, I neglected to do so in the beginning, is that in addition to the new section, you'll also see in the amendment that we're adding and amending 7932-110. And in addition, we will need to make a change, I believe, possibly to the title and also to the repealer to just technically accomplish inserting another statute into the bill.
Senator O'Shea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It does make me wonder, why did we choose corporate income tax over one of the others? Is it because it's parallel to what this is influencing in the first place, or why did we choose that one as our starting point? Just curious.
You know, that's a great question. One reason is if we truly want to attract businesses and be competitive, we have an extremely high corporate income tax rate. In fact, it's my understanding that the governor of Missouri announced yesterday that they are lowering their corporate income tax rate, which is going to put us at bigger disadvantage. So if the goal is for us to be competitive, we must be competitive on all fronts, just not in offering incentives. So that is the reason. Any other questions? If not, do I have a motion? Senator Dahl.
Move that we pass this amendment.
I have a motion by Senator Dahl. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Senator O'Shea. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Senator Stephan.
I'd like to offer an amendment as well in regards to the property tax relief aspect. I do think it builds on this level playing field. I had the pleasure of watching the Chiefs game with one of our largest manufacturers and employers on Sunday night, and we discussed this bill, and he articulated lots of concerns, and the level playing field is the main one. And and we did discuss our inability to compete from a corporate tax rate, and we discussed our inability to compete from a property tax standpoint. And we've used that in other endeavors and it's come back to haunt us, and I'm very confident it will again. So my amendment, I think Charles, the one that removes the property tax. And the beauty of removing the property tax incentive from this is that it does keep the playing field level for those companies that are paying property taxes, and it also helps the individual citizen in the area who's paying property taxes as well. So this flows down through the corporate ranks and into the individual ranks, and further solidifies that concept of a level playing field.
Okay, Charles, do you care to go over the specifics, or?
I think Senator Stephan has
cover
covered it.
Okay, all right, great. We'll move on. Questions on this amendment? We'll take a minute to let everyone kind of look through it, so. Okay. Senator O'Shea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Probably a question for the reviser. This is one of those times where you think you're the only one with a question, you ask your neighbors, and you find out you're not crazy after all. What is a foreign trade zone?
I think it is actually defined in federal law, and it is an area that provides some benefits to firms. You know, I only have a vague understanding of a foreign trade zone, so I might defer to the Secretary of Commerce, but I believe it gives benefits to firms engaged in commerce, and it's under a federal law that was passed back in 1933, but I don't recall the exact specifics. So perhaps if the Chairman would give leave.
Mr. Hughes, would you care to answer that question? Please state your name for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Paul Hughes, Deputy Secretary for the Department of Commerce. As indicated, the federal foreign trade zone was established to help the United States be more competitive with foreign nations in the manufacturing space. What it allows is a company that's manufacturing in the United States to import raw materials and subcomponents through a manufacturing process, add value to what the finished good is, and then export that same product out of the country. And when they do that, the goods that they're importing and the finished goods that they're exporting are free of any federal duties that are attached to the product. And the intent is to make U.S. manufactured products more price competitive in the open market.
Thank you.
And, Mr. Secretary, we do have several of those around the state of Kansas, correct?
We do. Kansas has a really unique approach to foreign trade zones. It's an associated program. So in Kansas, roughly speaking, there are about 14 counties around the greater Wichita area and 17 counties around the greater Kansas City area that act as a collective free trade zone area. And so all of the industries that are there would be eligible for the program if they're importing and exporting goods. If there's a county that'd like to be added to one of those zones, it's about a 60-day process. It's largely administrative to where they would join one of the chapters that currently exists in the state.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Dahl.
This is probably for Charles or Senator Stephan may be able to answer this, but is there a deadline on the exemptions for these property taxes, or is it infinity and beyond?
We'll let Charles, if you want to answer that, and Senator Stephan, if you need to add something on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So under the current bill, there is no deadline. There is a sort of a soft ending in the sense that if the firm stops its operations, doesn't participate in the foreign trade zone anymore, or, you know, the operations change in the discretion of the Secretary, then the tax exemption would cease, but there is no period of years.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Charles, if, let's say the business cuts itself in half, or it doesn't operate the same that it operates, you know, initially, is there any penalty that they pay for on the property tax? Let's say they cut their business in half or so. Is there anything in this that would take away some of the incentives?
Well, and, you know, nothing specific comes to mind. I mean, the firm has to meet all requirements in the agreement. The firm has to make the complete investment. The firm has to build its facility or pay the bond. And with respect to the property tax exemption, the firm has to continue operations. So, you know, if something occurred to the structure of the firm subsequent to the firm meeting its requirements under the agreement, then, you know, Are you, I guess, are you referencing the property tax exemption specifically, or just sort of in
Well,
general?
what makes me a little bit nervous, may I? On page 17, it says, you know, we're taking out qualified firm, qualified supplier. And so if they're not qualified anymore, you know, I don't know about the incentives, you know, on the top of page 17. Lines, well, top 17, line 4 and 5.
Okay. Sorry, I'm looking at that language, but I'm not quite clear what you're referencing there.
Well, I'm just wondering, because we're taking that out of the bill. So let's say that this company comes in and it's not a qualified firm any longer, or qualified supplier, because of it doesn't make it, or it cuts back, or whatever. Do they still get the incentives if they're not a qualified firm any longer, I guess? Without knowing what the firm is, you know, it's hard to articulate in my mind what we're looking at. So let's say they cut themselves in half and they're not qualified any longer. Kind of beating around the bush here, aren't I, Charles?
Yeah, I guess I'm not quite sure how to answer that. I guess if by cutting themselves in half, they violate the agreement or they violate any other requirements of the act, then, you know, the provisions in the bill that require repayment and would all come into effect. If they make some kind of, you know, I mean, there are requirements that they have to be in a certain industry, you know, as I mentioned before, the level of investment. So I guess one would have to look at that with respect to the requirements of the bill and of the agreement. And if what their change violated the agreement and the terms of the bill, then they would be in violation, and you know, they wouldn't get any more benefits. But that's not, I mean, it's a vague answer. I'm not sure if I'm really getting to what you're.
So if we're in year 14 and the company isn't doing as well as they expected, some of it moves away, do they still get the tax benefits, property tax benefits, for example? That's what I guess I'm asking. Does some of these things go away that are forever?
Well, the property tax investment is limited to a period of time. If you recall, so I'll speak to that one specifically. If you recall, the property tax investment is based on the amount of the investment that is made each year. And that investment has to be made within 5 years. And then there's a provision of time, because that the credit that they get is split in 3. And so, but there is a defined time period for that investment. So while they're getting that credit, they have to meet the requirements of the act. You know, after that period is passed, then, you know, that investment is done. That particular benefit is finished, right?
Senator
Still
Dahl?
paying property tax, so, and they're paying half the property tax, so that
Right.
is forever. That's what I guess what I'm getting to. So okay. I think we're making it a lot more complicated than it is, Charles, so it's my bad.
Senator Pittman.
Charles, we currently have the ability to get property tax exemptions in the state of Kansas, correct?
Yes.
My understanding is we might be able to get 10 years, maybe it's limited at 10, I'm not sure, of 100% tax exemptions if you
Right.
apply for it.
Yeah,
So
10
currently in law, we can get 100% off our property taxes for, not ours, but in this investment scenario, for 10 years, 100%, no taxes, 10 years. What we're asking for here in this particular program is 50%, which is 50%. That's half of what we were talking about with that, what they could get, 50%. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it says the secretary can put in place, continue only for a period as determined by the secretary in the underlying bill that's being stricken right now in this amendment. So section B of where we're being struck, 9B. So the secretary really could put a time limit on this as part of the incentive program. It's a negotiable thing, according to that 9B and the underlying bill there. Isn't that correct?
Yes, Senator. So you're correct. It's whether or not the firm is entitled to the to the property tax exemption with respect to the language there that was referenced by Senator Dole, you know, manufacturing operations or headquarters operations continue, active participation in the foreign trade zone program. So whether or not the firm is meeting that requirement is in the secretary's discretion. So I would think that that there would be language in the agreement that would sort of pertain to that, but you know that would.
And one could argue that if you just take linear logic, like some of the folks have talking about, we could take 20 years at 50%, which could be the equivalent of 10 years at 100%. This allows us to get some benefits from the property tax right out of the gate, and then we're foregoing that zero tax base for the 10 years that they could already get. So I think this is, I'm not really supportive of this particular amendment. I think that we have stuff in place that's potentially worse. I don't think this makes this program more competitive at all to those that are looking in. So I'm standing against this particular amendment, Madam Chair.
Any other questions? Senator Tyson.
I'll wait till the motion and we're debating the amendment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Make the motion that we pass this amendment as stated.
It's been moved by Senator Steffen. Do we have a second? Second by Senator Tyson. Further discussion. Senator Tyson?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. One of the biggest things we hear from our constituents and from people across the state of Kansas is property tax and how high property taxes are. And we do try to bring incentives to bring people in and businesses in, and they do have a 10-year abatement. But if you would look to the wind program, that we abated their property taxes indefinitely, any of them that were built prior to 2016. And look what we ended up doing. We ended up bringing them in under property tax as everyone else is. They have a 10-year abatement. So I think this amendment is very reasonable and addresses a major concern for many of our constituents. It will help lower property taxes for all of the people in the area where these businesses go into. I'm glad the senator brought the amendment.
Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I suppose I should have asked this of the reviser prior to the motion getting made. Would this amendment, and I can ask the maker of the amendment, or he can pass me on to the reviser, would this amendment still allow for local units of government, if they wish to abate property taxes? Because a lot of property tax abatements are done at the local level. I'm just throwing that out, and you tell me, Madam Chair, who I'm asking the question of.
Senator, okay, we'll go, he's pointing at you, so.
Okay. Senator, there's nothing in the bill that would foreclose a local government from doing that I'm aware of.
Okay, so this would really be allowing the state to make certain that we receive our 21.5 mils. Is that correct?
No, Senator, this would be, you know, real estate property taxes in general, as I understand it, not just the state portion.
I guess, Madam Chair, what I'm asking is, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble tracking. I thought I got an answer that this amendment would not disallow local units of government from abating property taxes for this business.
I don't believe so.
Okay. So by not exempting 50% of the property taxes, that means the state would receive 100% of their 21.5 mils.
I'd have to pass on that and maybe get back to you and ask our property tax expert. I wouldn't be able to respond to that at this moment.
I'm going to let Dylan weigh in. Dylan?
If it's all right with the revisor, that is my understanding, is that you're removing the property tax exemption so that the state portion, which is the school portion, the 20 mils would still be in effect. Of course, you know, and also, you know, whatever local action is taken, there doesn't appear to be anything in the bill that would preclude local tax abatements.
Madam Chair, I appreciate that answer, and that's what the road I was somewhat trying to go down, because a vote against this amendment is a vote to reduce the amount of money coming to the state for us to fund education. If I'm stating that right. If I'm not stating it right, I prefer for the reviser or the research, someone else to make me aware that I have misstated, because this could be looked at forever going forward now.
We have a response from Charles or Dylan before we move to Senator Pittman.
I'm not sure I'm following his question. Do you understand it? I mean, if there's no exemption, we get it all.
That's my point.
There you go. Dylan.
Madam Chair, I wouldn't characterize it. I don't think the Legislative Research Department would characterize it one way or the other, but it is correct that it would, removing it would leave the state portion intact.
Which we then would use for funding education part of it. Okay, I'll leave it alone, but I thought that would be important for us to make certain that we're all trying, because this is a big piece of legislation. I'm struggling, and if we were to take this piece by piece like we are, by 1, 2 o'clock, I'll understand it, I think. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Pittman.
I'm looking forward to 1 o'clock. I think I'd characterize it that if we give 100% tax exemption like we do today for 10 years, we get 0. If we have 50% as an incentive structure, we're going to get 50% of that and then have revenue coming off of that. And in contrast to the program that we would inevitably use or potentially use, because this doesn't mean that they have to use it, but inevitably we're going to see that 100%, any percentage of 0 is not going to the education coffers. 50% is, I think, a reasonable amount that we're going to get from these companies for that first 10 years, which we wouldn't get. And it will be, it's basically the same over 20 years. Now, at that 20-year mark, you're right, if it goes that far. So I can see your point once we get to that 20-year mark. But as it stands, even though it doesn't say it in the bill, 20 mils on 0 is still 0 if it goes with the normal incentive program. That's how I see it. I know it's a little different interpretation, but appreciate your point.
Senator Stephan.
Thank you. Again, this gets back to the level playing fields. We have local taxpayers, we have local businesses that are put upon by big programs like this. And it is our responsibility to treat them in a similar pattern that we do a new business. I've encouraged from day one at looking at this bill that the Commerce Department and an incoming business look at what the other options are from a commerce standpoint. What other corporate handouts are there out there? And there's nothing that says that this has to be the monstrous program that can't be refused. We do have to aspire to the level playing fields, and with the corporate tax cut that we amended on here, and with removing the property taxes, we've shown the people of the state of Kansas that we are concerned about how they perceive this, because the wording within this bill does make it possible that this is a wildly profitable, publicly owned company. It could be a wildly profitable, publicly owned company that's wholly foreign owned. It could be a wildly profitable, foreign owned company coming in doing an environmentally dirty business. There's nothing in this bill that prevents any of that. And we, as a legislative body, have to be aware of the perception that this bill could create. And so by standing strong for level playing fields is very, very important. And I think this simple removal of the property tax, which hasn't worked well at all in other sectors as far as level playing fields, it's a simple step to helping people understand what went on in here. Thank you.
Senator Ware.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I am absolutely all about level playing field. The concept is just appropriate. Here, though, we're not talking about level entities. We're talking about a very high level, big businesses and those much, much smaller. So it's not even the same game. So the level playing field kind of doesn't apply as much as it might in another kind of setting. I understand the perception and all, but this one is outside of that bounds, I'm afraid.
Any other comments? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Appears the ayes have it. We will have a roll call. So, show of hands. That's what I'm trying to get at. Show of hands, all in favor, raise your hand. See 3 opposed. 4. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that in the voice count. So it looks like the amendment fails. Any other? Senator Tyson. Thank you, Charles. Wish to explain the amendment?
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So this amendment basically changes the investment tax credit by making that credit not refundable. As you recall, in the original bill, there was a provision that the Secretary had discretion after applying some factors that were set out in the bill to designate in the agreement a portion of the investment tax credit after it was applied to tax liability that would be refundable, and that discretion was up to 100%. So this amendment, first of all, on page 10, we have an addition that adds the factors that, under the current bill, would have been applied to considering whether or not to make the credit refundable and how much of the credit to be made refundable. We're moving that here, so it applies to the amount of the investment credit that is earned, which, as you recall, can be up to 15% of the investment made each year. On page 11, we're adding just some language again we're striking language there at the top of the page, just, references to the refundable aspect of the tax credit. We're adding some language that just clarifies that, when an installment portion of the earned tax credit remains, after it's been applied against taxpayers' tax liability, it's going to be carried forward for application, again, within that 3-year period that the installment portion or the earned tax credit can be used. So that's basically what this amendment does. It just removes refundability of the tax credit. Instead of being refundable, the tax credit is first applied against the taxpayer's tax liability. Any unused amount is then carried forward. And then there's the same restriction that if it's not utilized by the end of the 3-year period, then it is forfeited.
Senator Tyson?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would move my amendment and then look for discussion.
It's been moved. Do I have a second? Seconded by Senator Peck. Discussion on the amendment. Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I don't mean to be condescending to anybody, but if you do not know the terminology for refundable in tax, that means you can get back more than you paid in. When I started as a freshman in the legislature, there were over 19 refundable tax programs, meaning you could get more money back. The state writes you a check. So it has been my goal since I have been elected to decrease and remove those types of programs. We are down to now 6 or 7. We've been removing them. So I would ask that the committee support this amendment. It's not, they still have the credits available. They can still carry them forward for 3 years. It just says the state of Kansas will not be writing you a check for more income tax than you paid in. That's all it's doing.
Any further discussion, questions? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I really appreciate the Tax Committee Chair bringing forth this amendment. This portion, the refundable tax credits, was probably my biggest opposition to Senate Bill 347, because I just could not see why we would consider such a, as we're being told, massive, large business corporation receiving my tax dollars or other Kansas taxpayers' tax dollars through a refundable tax credit. So I'm very supportive of this. This has to be on for me to consider, and I'm not, it's not a threat at all. It's just, I just cannot support this legislation without the refundable part being taken off. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Senator Pittman, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is for the maker of the I'm a little out of my element on this one, and appreciate your expertise on this, appreciate your efforts on this type of piece. Maybe I can either ask Charles or someone else, but maybe you can explain, how does depreciation, how does this interact with depreciation, and how do the tax credits work such that, just kind of help me understand that. I think what you're saying is you don't want to see anything decrease to amount where we're actually putting money back to that organization. How does that work when we have depreciation and the credits? Can you just kind of lay that out? You don't have to. I understand I should know about this, but if you want, I would love to hear it.
Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would be glad to lay that out, but all this amendment does is the refundable portion. It doesn't take away any of the options to depreciate, or it just says you can only get to zero. You cannot get negative. Because if we do not pass this amendment, the state of Kansas could end up writing them a check for millions or hundreds of millions, depending on the size of the company and the tax credits that we have allowed through this legislation. I'm just saying, you can get to zero, you can't get negative refundable. That's all I'm asking the committee to do.
Other comments, questions? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? No. Okay, I'm going to learn from my last one and make sure. So I want to make sure we have it accurate. Show of hands, all in favor? I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 opposed. 3, motion carries. Other comments or questions? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I do not know how to tell the revisers which, because I saw him have a large folder there of amendments, but I do have an amendment for the legislation, and this is the one that the second page in the box, the balloon on the side has in big words, Kansas resident. And while he's looking for that, when he hands it out, my focus here is to make certain that we are doing this for Kansas residents, Kansas citizens, and United States citizens. So there are 2 balloons that are put into the bill by this amendment, and one, you will see it when you receive it. I don't have anything on the front page of mine. I don't have anything on the front page of mine, Charles. Oh, okay. But again, Madam Chair, the purpose is to make certain that we are doing this for Kansas residents, United States citizens, and not for foreign individuals and out-of-state individuals.
Okay, for the explanation, do we have a motion? Senator Peck, do you want to move your?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yes, Madam Chairman, appreciate it. I would move that we amend Senate Bill 347 with the balloon amendment that I have offered.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Senator Tyson, discussion and questions on the amendment. Senator Pittman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So it looks like we would only be giving this, according to the new amendment, to Kansas residents. Is that correct?
Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. That is my intent.
Okay. And so then the other part of this is that a qualified business, is that only on the payroll, or is that on the actual qualified firm? Does the firm have to be, obviously the firm can't be a resident. Are we talking about the employees that are in the payroll only, or is it that we don't want to give these to any business that's not registered as a Kansas corporation? I'm kind of confused, I'm sorry.
Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, you are trying to confuse me. But no, the business will, of course, be located in the state of Kansas, and it's my intent that the employees also be Kansas residents who are United States citizens.
Could I go ahead one more time?
Senator Pittman.
Appreciate that, and ideally, we do have the residents in Kansas so that they're living in our residence, but with these global companies, I could guess that some of their employees might be in Missouri, in Oklahoma, in New York. Forbid that, of course, you know, but it could even be outside of the United States. We are attracting global, this is probably a global business when it's at this level of investment. I think we'd be handcuffing the state of Kansas on the global competitive field if we only allowed them to have all Kansas residents inside of that company. And with that, I feel as though I need to oppose this, unfortunately.
Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. If they have employees that are outside the United States or non-citizens, they would not be counted as a part of the incentive.
Senator Wilborn.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My concern is in our community, we have a number of global operations, and occasionally, you know, because of certain expertise, they need to bring in certain expertise from overseas. And I understand where you're headed with this, but I'm afraid that we will not have we're not allowing them to function in a way that they can professionally develop their company. And I'm also concerned about shortage of employees in some areas, and maybe some of those employees will have to move in here. So again, I'll use the word handcuff. I understand where you're headed, but I think this is a little too constraining if we truly want an operation to move into Kansas. And more than likely, it'll be an operation that is not domiciled originally from Kansas. And there's a lot of foreign employees in our community that provide the expertise that this would disqualify. So I have to oppose this amendment.
Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I appreciate the author of the amendment. I think there's some misconception here. This is only restricting the tax incentives to state residents or U.S. citizens, correct?
Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. That, again, is the intent. If you look on page 3, a qualified business employee means a person who is a United States citizen and a Kansas resident and is employed in Kansas by et cetera. So this may precipitate some individuals to move to the state of Kansas. Not a bad thing. But if they are not, then they would just not be counted as a qualified business facility employee for the purpose of the incentive.
Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, for that clarification. Senator, I would say that you're not tying the company's hands. They can hire whomever they want. It's just the tax incentive would be a priority for Kansas residents and U.S. citizens. I think that's a great idea, and I think our Kansas constituents would appreciate it greatly. Thank you.
Senator Wilborn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I understood what the intent was, but I'm telling you to take away the tax incentives for that employee over, if the volume's very large, is a disincentive. And I just think we're headed the wrong direction there.
Senator Stephan.
Thank you. Well, I would disagree with that statement. The whole point of this bill is to benefit the state of Kansas and the people of the state of Kansas, and to tie a little incentive to an employee who is a Kansas resident makes very good sense to me. It doesn't keep the business from hiring anybody they want in any way, shape, or form. It just ties the incentive to a Kansas resident, and that's just good business sense to me. Thank you.
Other questions, comments on this amendment? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? No. Appears that the noes have it, the amendment fails. Any other? Division has been called. We will have a show of hands on the last amendment. All those in favor, say aye, raise your hand. Seeing 2 opposed, same sign. Fails. Okay, this with the yes. Okay, any other discussion on the bill? We are back on the bill. Any other discussion? Amendments, Senator Peck. Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I feel for Senator Tyson because having grown up in the area that she represents and has friends in, there's been a loss of life, and it's been difficult for Senator Tyson. Just thought I would mention that. But I'm going to go ahead and move forward with an amendment that I have. It's a simple, non-controversial, no. It, reviser says on the front, requiring legislative approval for project. And what this amendment would do would be to require the legislature to approve, since we're talking such a massive, and we've heard many, many times that this is a major, massive, large investment / corporation that's looking at the state of Kansas. And so if that's the case, rather than just putting it in the lap of one person, meaning the Secretary of the Department of Commerce, this would require legislative approval, and you'll see that's in the title, of the project by adoption of a resolution introduced by both houses. Now, you will then see in the second balloon, or on the second page, that the Secretary, even if the legislature, both houses of the legislature do approve by resolution such an entity coming into Kansas, that the Secretary may approve or disapprove, that's toward the bottom in the box, the project, and proceed pursuant to the provisions of this act. So if one house, one chamber, does not approve by resolution, then such an entity, the legislature, the people's elected representatives, would be saying that we're not certain that we want you in our state. So it lays the responsibility where I believe it better fits, and that's with the elected representatives, several collective minds looking together, working together, and no disrespect or no insult toward any Secretary of Commerce that we have had, do have, or will have. It's just simply saying that the legislature, you're the ones that the people are looking to make these major decisions. And I will make a motion whenever you want me to.
Yes, Senator Peck make motion. Senator Peck moves his amendment. Do we have a second? Senator Tyson seconds. Discussion on the amendment. Senator O'Shea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My concern with this is timing. A lot of times these projects move quickly, and if legislators not in session, or as we can see, we're a little bit slow on things sometimes. So that's my concern. Thank you.
Other comments, questions? Senator Stephan.
As an individual who's been in business a lot of years and has a lot of gray hairs in relation to it, slow is good.
Other questions, comments on this amendment? Seeing none, we have a motion and a oh, I'm sorry, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Appreciate the author of the amendment. You know, the Secretary of Commerce is the only set of eyes that's going to be on these projects. And this makes perfect sense that we bring another set of eyes, the legislature, especially when it's going to obligate us for this kind of financial effort going forward. So I really appreciate this. The legislature, by the state constitution, has the power of the purse. We should not be turning it over to one secretary of one department. And so I absolutely will be supporting this and appreciate the effort.
Senator Peck?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. As it relates to the comment from the senator from Shawnee, I had thought of that, and I appreciate her sharing that concern, but if it is such a major project as the senator from Lynn just indicated, which we're all looking at $1 billion plus, a special session can be called by the governor, and I would hope that if we are looking at another such major corporation coming to our state, this doesn't happen overnight, but they could certainly call a special session, which, yes, that costs a little bit of money. But if we do the right thing as a legislature in protecting Kansas citizens' tax dollars, because if I remember correctly, the refundable, oh, it did go on. But in any event, I believe it still should be the responsibility of the legislature to make such a major decision. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Senator Pittman?
I also appreciate the maker of the amendment. However, I don't agree with this particular concept as shown here. I don't think this is the proper level of oversight. I think it's a little bit too cumbersome. I mean, the resolutions, it's just a bit over the top in terms of the oversight on this particular thing. I'm not opposed to some oversight on these procurement type situations, but I don't think this is the right mechanism in this particular circumstance myself. So, but appreciate the maker of the amendment and his intent.
Senator Tyson, then Senator Wilborn.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would remind the committee and ask them, are they familiar with the K-Tech program? And most of you have not heard of it. You know why? Because it was dissolved. Because it was a great, brilliant idea that was going to bring all these work and all this business to the state of Kansas. It no longer is in the works. I would ask you about the Bioscience Authority. Have you heard of that? That was going to bring all these great jobs, wonderful jobs. It ended up being closed down because of abuse of the program. We didn't have a second set of highs. We had certain individuals that were handing out the money for these projects. So this makes perfect sense because this program is bigger than the Star Bonds, the original NASCAR, any other incentive program that the state has ever passed. This is larger than. So it makes perfect sense to ask for another set of eyes to look at these programs. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Senator Wilborn, then Senator Stephan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The maker of the amendment will ask a question of him. Have you, because of this 9 month that we're not in session is an issue, and I think you admitted that, would you cede that off to the LCC or a body that meets a little bit more regularly as opposed to having to call a special session? I understand where you're headed with this. I get that. But, you know, we got 9 months we're not in session. And citizen legislature, it's hard to get in attendance, you know what I'm saying. So I'm just trying to think how to satisfy that extra set of eyes without having to call the legislature back those 9 months.
Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I appreciate the question of the senator. We are pretty much here 3 months and gone 9. However, we are here in May, so that cuts it down by a couple months. I had considered that fact of the LCC, and that would be better than nothing for certain. but that was not my preference and is not my preference. I just believe that a project such as this or a proposal such as this is not something that happens real quickly. And if it does, we certainly are going down the wrong path if something like this moves too quickly. So I guess to answer the question, of those 7 months that June through December that we are not here, I don't have a problem again with a special session, with the governor calling us back, because we are talking again, not just a regular project, we're talking about something that's rather massive. Thank you.
Senator Stephan.
Thank you. You know, I do think it's important to keep in mind what works in the private sector, and that's boards of directors and oversight of a president. And I think this amendment is spot on, and that a secretary and an unelected president needs oversight. We're responsible for the finances of the state. It makes perfect sense that it's the legislature. And I know I'm personally more than happy to come back for a special session to address a situation like this. And those of us who follow publicly traded companies, billion-dollar companies, we know that these really don't happen in a time-sensitive fashion. These play out over a year, 2 year, 3 years at a time. So I don't see that being an issue. I do see us using the legislature as the board of directors and helping make sure that we don't just start another failed program.
Seeing no other questions, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Appears the noes have it. We will do a show of hands. Those in favor, please raise your hand. 3. Those opposed, same sign. 5 opposed, so motion fails. Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having the uncomfortable feeling that the previous amendment may fail, I thought, well, we should have a backup plan. And so I do have one more amendment. Sorry, I don't have several more, but one more. And this would be the one that established a Commerce Oversight Council. And while that is being looked at, you will get more than one stack likely, unless he did get it all put together. But this would establish an oversight council for approval of projects such as the one that we're looking at. And then the council would be made up of 14 members. And you will see when you receive the information who the 14 members are. For example, you've got the chairs of the Standing Commerce Committee, Ways and Means Committee in the Senate, and in the House that are of the similar committees. I'm trying to see if I can find the name. But anyway, the Commerce Committee chair and the Appropriations chair and so forth. And it may be easier, rather than me stumbling through this, Madam Chair, if we would allow the reviser to spend just a moment and tell us exactly who the members are, but then they would be the ones, since the legislature is not going to have the opportunity to look at such as all 165 members, this would be 14 of us.
Charles, can you provide the detail?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. So if you look on the attachment, which is toward the back of the amendment, you'll see new section 12 there, and the members of the 14 members are kind of listed there. There are 3 members who are economic development professionals. One of those is appointed by the governor, one by the Speaker of the House, and one by the President of the Senate. Then we have the chairpersons of the Senate Commerce, Senate Ways and Means, House Commerce, and House Appropriations. Those are appointed by the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House representatives, respectively. There's also an additional sentence there that the chair of the Appropriations and Ways and Means can designate a member of their committees to appear in their place. The other members, 3 members of the Senate, 2 of those are appointed by the members of the minority party. They're appointed by the minority leader. One is appointed by the president of the Senate as a member of the majority party. And those members must 3 members of the House. Again, those need to be selected by from the membership of the House Commerce Committee. One of those is a member of the majority party appointed by the Speaker. 2 are members of the minority party appointed by the minority leader of the House. Finally, we have the Secretary of Commerce or the Secretary's designee. And those are the members of the council.
Thank you, Senator O'Shea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So trying to understand how this would work. The Department of Commerce would be working with the site selectors, would be narrowed it down, and as they're ready, they would essentially put together the package and say, we want to extend this offer or partnership to this potential incoming company. And then this council would vote yay or nay?
Essentially, yeah. I mean, the way it's set up is the Secretary of Commerce would appear before the council, provide information to the council about the proposed project. The council could require testimony from other employees of the Department of Commerce or actually an employee of any state agency or elected official or appointed official. And then those discussions could take place in a closed session, so to prevent any release of confidential information. And then the council would make a decision.
Thank you. As a follow-up, that was going to be one of my questions, is the confidentiality of these companies and where they're going to locate. Is that something that then we would, as a state, say, okay, you need to disclose to this 14-member legislature council what you're doing?
Yes.
Okay. And that, so one of my first thoughts is, again, in economic development practice, you don't disclose this information because it will cause them to choose other states. That's just the way that it works. So that's a concern for me. I also believe that just the more hoops we make them jump through, there's other states that are pulling hoops away. Thank you.
Any other questions for the reviser? Senator Peck, would you care to move your amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I would move that we amend Senate Bill 347 with the amendment that I have offered.
We have a motion, a second by Senator Stephan. Further discussion and questions. Senator Tyson.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate Senator O'Shea's comments. I would like to make it clear that there has been more than 14 people that have signed non-disclosure statements. So that would be comparable to what would go on with this committee. And this is modeled, if I may, Senator Peck, it appears to be modeled after the Unemployment Oversight Council, which has been working extremely well. We have gotten great results because of that council. And to me, this addresses the flexibility that Senator Wilburn had brought up as to having a special session. It would not require that. It would be the flexibility of being called within a day or two. I think this is a much better amendment than your last one, if I may. So I appreciate this. Thank you, Senator Peck. They were both good, but this one's really good. So thank you.
We can have a little levity at this time of night. Senator Dahl.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can tell that Senator O'Shea has worked with economic development, because when I was on the city commission, we lost 2 businesses because word got out, because somebody spoke, and we had them on the altar. We had them right there, and we lost them because word got out. Whether it's right or wrong isn't the issue. The issue is that's reality. And so if we don't want to deal with reality, we can let it out. We can tell people, we can have full disclosure, but we're not going to get these companies. So if you want to grow, there's some games you got to play, and that's one of them.
Senator Tyson.
Thank you. Maybe the committee didn't know my background in IT. We definitely sign non-disclosures all the time. It is part of the industry. And I would bring to the committee's attention the non-disclosure situation in Tonganoxie. It was kept so secret and so private, and there was major pushback by the constituency in that area, in that district, and they shut down the plant from coming to that area. And we could have had them in Kansas. There were several locations that would have been proud to have that plant. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Other questions, comments on the amendment? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It appears there are no additional questions, so I thought that I would just, if you will, semi-close on, and of course, someone can ask a question because you didn't recognize me to close, but I would remind the committee that 10 of the 14 members are legislators. 3 are individuals selected by legislative leadership and the governor that have expertise in the field of economic development, and the other is the Secretary of Commerce. I would tend to trust that these 14 individuals would be able to keep it confident who it is. I'm confident, Madam Chair, that right now there are more than 14 persons in the state of Kansas who could tell us who this unknown business and entity is that we're doing this special treatment for in Senate Bill 347. And if we need non-disclosure agreements signed, so be it. I don't think we do. I believe that legislators can keep things quiet when we're talking about such a massive major. And I appreciate the senator from wherever he's from out west comment that if word gets leaked, the business can decide not to come. But when you're talking about such a major thing and the members of this economic development or commerce oversight council, I believe that anything can be leaked. I just haven't found it being leaked in the last week or so. We've been working as a legislature on 347. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator O'Shea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I kept hearing that the concern is that only one pair of eyes see and approves this, but then I've been hearing that way more than 14 people have already seen what this project is. So it appears to me that there are more than one person's eyes on the project. Thank you.
Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. That is not accurate. One set of eyes signs the contract and obligates the state for the millions or hundreds of millions, or in this case, billions of dollars. This would be having more than one signature on the contract. Years ago, I tried to run an amendment, and it was very successful. It went on that would have had the Secretary of Commerce and the Secretary of Revenue signing off on these projects, so that we had somebody that was spending the money and somebody that realized the impact to the revenue. We lost it in conference committee because of who was negotiating. It was against their own vested interest in their own company. And so we lost that amendment in conference committee. I think we need more than one signature on these contracts when we're signing the state up for this kind of money.
Senator Pittman.
I'll also mention that the Secretary of Commerce does work for the elected official of the governor. So that it is an elected, and they're going to be in high conference with the governor. This amendment doesn't actually address whether there's multiple signatures. It says, in fact, that once the council approves the project, the Secretary of Commerce may approve the project. So basically, it keeps the contract still with one signature. And we know that they're working with local entities under these NDAs to look at local impact, and no one benefits from a company that's not wanted in a local community. We know this is supported by many, many chambers of commerce, many local entities of government who want to help develop And we know that through experience that we can't bring in companies that are going to disrupt or be unwanted in a local community. So I do agree that we could potentially take this kind of oversight committee. I think it probably deserves some consideration, but I don't really feel comfortable putting this in place. I don't know if the makeup is right at this time, so I'm opposed to this amendment.
Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know we could discuss companies that come in all the time that the locals are not receptive to. I can tell you these wind turbines that are coming into certain areas are very controversial. There's the extreme side that absolutely want them and the side that does not want them. And so, and technically, yes, the Secretary of Commerce would be the only signature, but the Oversight Committee would have weigh-in and buy-in. And I have an advantage because I do sit on the Unemployment Council, and I have seen how effective that has been in addressing unemployment issues through the Department of Labor. And I would just appreciate this. I think it would be beneficial. We would get not only legislative buy-in, but industry, people that are experts and do this for a living, not just a few legislators that understand the process and others that see I always compare it to, you guys may not remember it, when in high school, we used to have stereo systems. They were smaller and they got bigger and bigger, and the guys that always wanted the big speakers and the big stereo. And this is how this looks to me. The new computer, the new flashy system without understanding what's under the hood. You may not need a gaming machine. You may just need a machine that does bare bones word processing. But boy, that gaming machine sure looks good. So I think we need to make sure that we are at the right caliber and the right level of incentive programs for the state and the type of businesses we want to bring in.
Senator Steffen.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a great point that Senator Tyson makes. And it brings me to a quick story. I recently drilled an oil well that we had lots of problems with. And while I know a little bit about the oil field, I don't know a lot about it. So what I did was I went to a multitude of people and sought advice. I surrounded myself with good people to help me make the right decisions. And that's what good business people do. That's what people who understand their shortcomings and their lack of knowledge base in particular areas do. I would think that a Secretary of Commerce would embrace the concept of a board of directors such as this. And I support this amendment without question because it's good business, it's good governance. Thank you.
Senator Peck, care to open another can of worms?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. You're welcome. I don't really have anything additional to add. I think I've said, and my colleagues have said on both sides, yes and no. So whenever you're ready to vote, I guess I am as well.
Okay, seeing no other questions or discussion, we have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? No. Appears the noes have it. Division has been called. So show of hands, those in favor, raise your hand. 3, those opposed. Appears 5, motion fails. Back on the bill, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would make a motion that we move the bill out unfavorably for passage.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Second by, I saw Senator Peck. So discussion, questions on the motion. Senator Pittman.
I'd like to make a substitute motion that we move this bill out favorably for passage.
As amended.
I'm sorry, as amended. Thank you.
Submitted.
Point of order.
Yes, Senator Tyson, point of order.
Some committees do not allow substitute motions.
We do allow that, so we do have a substitute motion. Do I have a second? Senator Dahl. So we are on the substitute. Senator Pittman.
Madam Chair, as part of my motion, if the second will have it, I'd like to additionally give some discretion for mild adjustments to make the language of the amendments we put in place clearer.
Okay, does the second, Senator Dahl, do you concur with that? Okay, so we are on the substitute motion. Any questions, discussion? Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would just like to comment quickly. Thank you, Charles, for all your work on this. I know you put a lot of extra time and a lot of extra hours in. So thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I didn't really want to necessarily kill the bill, even though I made the second to pass it out unfavorably. I am very concerned at the rush that we're going through. A little historical information. I cannot help but remember back in my House days in the mid-2000s when we had major pieces of legislation, we would spend weeks, not in committee, but off and on in committee on major pieces of legislation such as this. This is a new road that we are going down as it relates to the dollar amount and several of the incentives. Now, I do appreciate the fact two of the amendments that went on are great, the removing the refundable tax credit, buying down corporate income tax rates as we move forward with the revenue that we may or may not see from such an entity. But because of the fact I don't have a full understanding of all the ramifications, there's been so much secrecy behind this project, this legislation, I just cannot at this time. I could in the future probably because I like business incentives. I like doing things, but until I have a better comprehension and understanding of all the ramifications of Senate Bill 347, I'm a no. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions, discussion on the substitute motion? Seeing none, you have heard the motion and second. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
Appears that the motion passes. Senator Stephan.
Thank you. I want my no recorded on the record, please.
Any other members wish to have their vote recorded? Okay, with that, the motion passes. Let me check, make sure we've covered all our bases. Okay, with that, committee, we have concluded our work. I appreciate your time and the late hour that it is. Thank you, staff. We are adjourned.